So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Employer Brand with Purpose. How Vodafone's looking at Vodafone's journey from EVP definition to global deployment. In a few minutes, I'll be delighted to introduce Catalina Schweninger, who's Global Head of Resourcing and EVP at Vodafone, who's going to take us through their journey from defining the employer brand to its deployment and localization across 26 countries. Some housekeeping: the webinar will last for approximately 45 minutes. We will have questions at the end, so please post your questions into the questions box on the control panel, and we will share the on-demand version with everybody who's registered for the webinar. So first, what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes setting the context for what Catalina is going to talk about by looking at the new candidate's decision journey and its implications for talent acquisition and candidate engagement strategy. So really, in terms of what's changed, I mean, so the candidate's decision journey is changing, and obviously the pace of change will be dependent on specific types of candidates, younger candidates, and specific types of industry. But we are moving from what used to happen, where there wasn't a significant amount of information out that candidates could access about companies. So they would they would apply, and they would need to talk to a recruiter to get all that information. So recruiters could post the vacancies and then wait. They could wait for the perfect candidate to magically find that job and apply for it. But nowadays, candidates have dramatically kind of changed the way that they research and evaluate potential employers. The amount of information that is out there across digital channels, on the internet, how visible employers are, coupled with the emergence of an increasingly discerning, well-informed candidates, means that a more sophisticated approach is required to help recruitment teams succeed. So I mean, we're moving into a period of increased competition. There, the post and pray model is failing. Research by McKinsey recently highlighted that 71% of companies are not getting enough qualified applicants. Indeed, 40% of companies have got unfilled vacancies for 6 months or longer because they can't find qualified applicants. So in order for talent acquisition to become increasingly effective, the recruitment journey and process needs to begin long before a candidate applies for a job. So a much more proactive approach, building talent pools and developing talent pipelines. Recruitment teams need to start thinking like marketeers, and in terms of how can they attract high quality passive candidates by engaging them with relevant and compelling content. How can they adapt to this new candidate journey by reaching them at the moments that most influence their decisions, and that particularly related to employer brand is how can employers best use their investment in employer brand to stimulate and nurture candidates' interest. Candidates will go through these stages of awareness, education, and consideration, and then as part of that journey, they will be, they're looking for, specific information about an organization in terms of, so where's that organization going? What does the senior management team say? What does the CEO say? What do the departmental teams say there? What kind of competencies and skills are they looking for within people? What's the career advancement? What's the work-life balance like? What's it like to work there? And they will do that on their own. And at any one time, there'll only ever be a tiny percentage of the high quality passive candidates that are actually, really seriously considering the opportunities they've got available. So how is it that organizations can do all of this in terms of, engagement, attract and find and nurturing, etc., but also identify who's really seriously looking at them? And you need a technology platform in order to do that. So we really look at all the stages of the new candidate decision journey, and how we power that in terms of from that, the initial trigger stage could be, triggered by email outreach or, social referral, employee referral, or it could be some advertising or some AdWords or posts on job boards or a direct, outreach from a recruiter. And that starts the information gathering journey. And that journey can be, nurtured and prompted by engagement with email nurturing campaigns or microsites, the career site, some retargeting, newsletters, updates on company social media, stores, etc. So that's where Candidate ID really fits in terms of powering all of that, and also being able to identify, exactly where they are in their decision-making journey, so that organizations can really identify who to prioritize in terms of follow-up. So obviously what underpins all of this information gathering journey and the triggers is the employer brand and the collateral material that's developed as part of the EVP. So without any further ado, on that basis, I'd now like to introduce Catalina, who is Global Head of Resourcing and EVP at Vodafone. She joined Vodafone HQ in London 3 years ago. I was previously HR Director of T-Mobile in the Netherlands and EME HR Director of GE's Security Division. A mother of two, Catalina is a passionate advocate for the attraction and development of talented women into organizations, and she's recently added digital marketing to her areas of expertise in what she says is a desperate attempt to stay a millennial. So I would like to now hand over to Catalina to take us through Employer Brand with Purpose.
Thank you, Scott. And hi, everybody. I'm delighted to have been invited by Scott and the team here, this webinar. Hopefully this will be interactive and you'll get a lot out of it. I would like to keep it very practical with learnings that we had on the journey, developing our employer brand, making sure it lasts and it lands well in the 26 markets where Vodafone operates. And just a little bit of background, why I'm passionate about this subject. I think, as Scott said, I'm trying to get into the nuts and bolts of digital marketing, and one of the big things of digital marketing is obviously you have to have a story, right? You have to develop that narrative that you can engage your audience with, and this is kind of how the journey begins. So, a bit of background. You probably are, especially if you're based in the UK. Vodafone is one of the, let's say, British old school startups. We are only 30 years young, and we started as a startup of, techie engineers out of Berkshire and developed into what we are right now, second largest operator in the world in terms of number of subscriptions and revenue, the largest IoT provider, and a very, very exciting, actually, in a very exciting industry that's ever changing and is being recently challenged by a new industry. So it's interesting, when I entered in telcos a couple of years ago, we were looking at Microsoft and Google and WhatsApp as our competitors, but boy, the world has changed in the last couple of years. So that's kind of a bit of a background. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to walk you through a bit of the history in the last couple of years since I joined and we started developing a brand and how we came with that. So basically, 3 years ago we were thinking, okay, right, we have a very strong brand, consumer brand, which is power to you, red background, basically not translatable in any market, very, very strong consumer brand in markets like UK, one of the strongest out there. But did we really know what our employees and our candidates thought about us? How, did we really know what the words were that they used when they were describing how it is like to work for at Vodafone, or what it is like to apply for Vodafone, right? So we realized that actually we didn't. And we had a very interesting conversation with marketing, because obviously being the marketing department of one of the world's strongest brands, they were like, wait a minute, of course you don't need an employer brand. What are you talking about? Employer, the brand is the brand is the brand.
Hi, Catalina. Can I
Yes.
ask you a quick question? I'm still waiting to view your screen, so just in case you, if
All
you,
right.
aha, yeah,
Are you seeing it
I can
now?
I can see it now. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. All right, so you can see this lovely smiley gentleman who's my boss, Vittorio Colau. All right,
Perfect. Thank you.
fantastic. So obviously, not very good at digital. Going back, right? We had this conversation with marketing. They kind of told us off, but we didn't give up. And the reason I have the CEO here on the slide is that contrary to how this discussion about the employer brand goes in other companies, we actually didn't start a conversation at the boardroom. It wasn't on Vittorio's top of mind. What the employer brand is. I think we had conversations with him in terms of he was always worried about what people think about us when they come in interactions with us, when we're having senior candidates coming for interviews, when we're having people in the retail stores, but there was never top of mind. So how we made it top of mind? We basically took the conscious decision on saying, okay, right, we have to identify what our identity is in terms of, what's the word on the street, what is behind Glassdoor, what do people feel in terms of the emotional interaction with us as an employer. So it's the first and the last time actually that we invested heavily in working with an agency because afterwards it's pretty much DIY. So I think it was a very wise decision to hire an agency and to have an extensive research of about 40,000 of our colleagues at every level in the organization, across all the markets, customers, stakeholders, and candidates. And the question was, give us the words about Vodafone, right? In terms of, again, what is that connection? What comes to mind when you think of Vodafone? So and we felt, and I always like to quote Jeff Bezos, who says, you're kidding yourself if you think the brand is the words you use to describe yourself. Actually, the brand is the words they use to describe you when you leave the room. We use kind of that philosophy and hire this agency and off you go and talk to our people and come back. Obviously, sneakingly, we put a kind of a two-way mirror in the back. But ultimately, the great outcome of that research was that this created not our view or that of Vittorio of the board of how it is like to work at Vodafone, but our own employees, right? And they also bottled it for us because we went further and actually asked them to give us examples of situations. So not just like big words like you typically do in the research. So it was both quantitative and qualitative research that we've done. And as I said, they bottle it for us. And what is actually came out of this research came up with 8 proof points. And on one hand, what it means to work at Vodafone, and on the other hand, what Vodafone offers as an employer. And you see, a lot of the words were not all that positive, right? So, for example, on what it is like to work here, what Vodafone expects from you, the word pace setting and crazy pace and customer focus came a lot, right? So a lot of pressure on people to perform, meritocracy, lots of change that's not always dealt with positively. So again, a lot of these things came out, as well as the really positive things of I'm actually feeling very proud to be associated with Vodafone because we do a lot of, through the foundation, through M-Pesa, we're doing a lot of good for humanity. And we are a truly international employer and things like that. So again, we basically what we translated is we said, all right, these are our 8 proof points, a two-way deal, if you want, the give and the get. And what we tried is we didn't want this to be a broadcast of how great we are. We wanted it to be a genuine offer that drove that inbound candidates that Scott was referring to in his intro. But obviously, staying true to our British roots, as I say, we originate from Berkshire 30 years ago, and we still kind of kept true to that heritage. We are very understated about it, right? So we wanted to avoid big words. We wanted to avoid also translating some of our leadership values. We wanted to use kind of common English words. And we also didn't expect employees to rehearse that every morning or every performance review or engagement surveys. So instead, we decided to unpack all these proof points using their stories and faces at a local level. that lets people see their peers' experience in each of our proof points. And I appreciate that. I think 3 years later, this doesn't sound groundbreaking anymore. Every other company is actually doing the same, which always shows me that, okay, we might have been on something, but that's the right thing that we bet on. So, for example, one of the proof points around mobile for good, Safaricom, our Kenyan business, transacts about 42% of Kenya's GDP on M-Pesa, which is our mobile banking groundbreaking solution. And in one of the stories, Boniface works in finance on M-Pesa, talks about how his wholesaler distribution solution changed the lives of 19 million Kenyans who wouldn't ordinarily have access to banking solutions, right? So that's a mobile for good example. Another example is Rudy in Germany, and you know how Germans like their cars, talks about how by using the Internet of Things, his team pioneered connected drive for a large German auto company. You can guess, it starts with B, and allowing them to stream music directly into the cars via LTE, which was, by the way, the first back then. I think most of you right now who drive a car now have LTE in your cars, but that was the first in the industry when Rudy was talking about this. So now we shared the what, right? So this is basically what we came up in terms of, what is the essence of the employer brand proposition. So to recap this, the give and the get, the proof points, and how we got from having no employer brand proposition whatsoever, only 3 years ago, to having a global "we're best when you're at yours" theme. Right, and obviously Scott mentioned, we're a complicated company, right? We like to call ourselves the most decentralized, centralized company in the world. We operate in 26 markets, but our CEO hates the word global, right? So we are not a headquarters here in Paddington. We are not even called corporate, right? So and because of the organic growth, but also inorganic, like I can give you an example, Mannesmann in Germany was the largest telco acquisition, 180 billion. But at the same time, we bought Cobra Automotive in Italy a couple of years ago with 20 million, right? So it's our footprint is very complex, again, very international, a lot of companies that we acquired in different stages of even their cultural evolution. And with that comes our belief that we truly respect the local roots. So at Vodafone, nothing that's invented in headquarters or here in Paddington lands just like that, just because we can, because we have it on the job title, right? So in true to that spirit of one company, local roots, we didn't want to force feed our ideas into markets, right? I mean, we have done that research centrally in collaboration with the markets, with our operating companies, but we really didn't want that to land as something that was invented at group level. But at the same time, more and more we needed to paint Vodafone as one company because this was, we believe, set us apart, and it was about time we thought about, right, where is our global position if we were competing in this really harsh war for talent out there. One of our strengths should be this global positioning, which we didn't have before. So how do you balance this local roots to painting us as one company rather than a collection of geographies or acquisitions? We also didn't want to be a GE or an Apple, because this is not who we are. So if you think, marketing gives you guys a hard time, when you are Britain's most valuable brand, it's far worse. So we had a couple of months of discussions on how do we go about this? Do we keep this global proposition? Do we go and localize it again? So basically, in the end, I think reason conquered, and we managed to get brand and comms together in a room and decide that it's for the best of the company, as we are ambitious and competitive, and we also want to be seen as a global employer, of choice, that we will have a global proposition. Now, the complication comes in: how do you make sure that you stay to the local roots? So basically, what we've done, we implemented across the business at all employee touch points this new philosophy of the 8 proof points, and we tested, like like marketers do in markets, how these 8 points landed. And surprise, surprise, actually, there was a consistency that was quite scary in their proposition. Right, so again, we sat down with also the functional heads and defined, okay, right, if I say if I say exceptional work with exceptional people, what does it mean for you in finance? And is it the same as you in finance in Albania as it is in the UK? So we've done that piece of work, and we made sure that when we're having the conversations, we were capturing in all their input and creating these guidelines to make it super practical and super easy for people to relate to the global message. So practically what we've done, we've created a guide for profiles, for example, that markets should use. And that was a suggestion, not a policy, right? But made it super easy and interesting enough for them to adopt without spending lots of money on creating new assets. And you know, I wish, for example, back then Paperfly or the rest didn't exist, right? Because now you have platforms where you can actually push a lot of that content and give it to markets so that they tweak it and they can adopt it and localize it without a lot of cost. I wish, you know, we had those tools back then. Then another way, we made it easy for employees to find and share branding materials. You know, very simple things. If I give you an example, we changed the PowerPoint templates to include imagery of our own employees instead of airbrush models, you know, doing funky things with, you know, with their phones. We also encouraged use in daily work, right? So tell us when you're at your best, right? Our recognition program started talking about when you are at your best. Or recognizing also other colleagues as being at their best. So again, so we put together this kind of set of guidelines that were adjusted to local policies and local practices, but in the bigger scheme of things, the comms had kind of the same look and feel. Now the markets were given the liberty of adopting them, and you know it turned out that a couple of proof points didn't resonate everywhere. So we said, fine, as long as you stay within this narrative, and as long as you're using employees with true stories that are not super polished, you know, and you use their own words and you use photography that again it's kind of very authentic, you know, we will take it, right? And you know, it started to believe, and I think for us, you know, we were thinking, okay, wait a minute, how do you measure employer brand? So when do we know that we actually done a good thing? You know, what does success look like? And we set ourselves, you know, we were, I think, in the beginning of the journey, and, you know, we were also new to social media. We had just started consolidating our LinkedIn presence, for example. On the other channels, we were a bit over the place. But we agreed with management and we said, right, when our employees are starting championing us externally, that's when success looks like. And we can track that, right? And once they are using these words and they're creating their own content and shouting on social without having any prompts, then that's when we call, you know, we have a brand that actually employees empathize with and they connect with, and they are very proud of talking about this openly on social media without a lot of prompts. And of course, you know, we had a big partnership with LinkedIn, and then there was a time when they launched their tool of social sharing, and we took a conscious decision of not going with a tool, because we said that will feel like we're pushing something, right? So we want it to be organic and natural. We, you know, again, in terms of local touches, right? Again, there was so many amazing stories of where you see the brand kind of taking a local view. For example, a UK business that you're probably more familiar with, they used the tagline, "We're best when you're at yours," but started to depict Vodafone life stories, right? And we didn't tell them, oh, you know, bad Vodafone UK, you shouldn't be using #Vodafone Life. I said, as long as it makes sense for you in the market, it resonates with your own employees, and you're keeping the stories alive, and you are kind of putting a lot of content around the proof points, then you know you're good. Now I love this slide, and you know, my friend Google Dave actually made this for me before. I think we were 2 years ago. We were speaking at a conference about this, and I keep on sweating this asset because I like it very much. So, you know, I think the lesson here is the employer brand. When you put a lot of thought into it, and you use a lot of agency money, and you create a lot of fantastic assets, it runs into a risk of being a buried treasure, right? And you know, I think the lesson was, build it to last. You know, telco is a very, very fast-moving industry, and you know, we felt that with the employer brand, this is a long shot, and we have to give it permanence. We didn't want to turn it into a campaign, and I think a lot of people fall into that trap of thinking, right, I've got a nice campaign now with nice taglines, then it's a brand. No, I think the brand is, again, it's when it's becoming part of the DNA and it lives its own lives, right? So in ideal world, I mean, we are now in year 3, and I can't say we're there yet, but more and more we're moving towards, maybe we're having 1 or 2 global campaigns a year, and that's it. The rest is a lot more user generated, a lot more kind of organic growth instead of, again, very, very polished, continuous campaign. So basically, how do we do that? You know, how do we keep it ingrained? We have an ongoing drumbeat. Every year we're doing something really sneaky. We have a kind of internal competition in terms of who's got the best employer brand deployment. And we recognize not the HR people or the brand people, but the CEOs at our senior leadership conference. So that's a moment when they stand up there on stage and they feel really proud about what their employees are saying. And interesting, you know, if I look at just our type of awards and recognition 3 years ago, we were never on any Glassdoor or any kind of employer of choice. And right now, I think twice we've been our CEOs in different markets, I think in the Netherlands, in UK, as well as Vittorio, have received that kind of recognition. So I think for me, again, these are proof points that our employees now can this kind of bought into this. I think other channels, it's interesting, I think our social media strategies changed and evolved over the years. We were completely media shy 3 years ago. We had very strict guidelines, more around against being out on social than on social, and that's a bit of a nature of our regulatory business, and of obviously the big exposure we have with customers and customer complaints. As you know, I mean, all of you, I'm sure you have at least one smartphone, if not 2, and your relationship with your smartphone is a personal one. And when you have a drop call, or when your video is not uploading, obviously you're not a very happy person, right? So because of that, we were extremely worried in the beginning to go out on social. So what we started in a safe environment. We rolled out Yammer, and we encouraged employees to start kind of getting their teeth into social internally. And it's interesting now to see a couple of years later, I think we got our external affairs in a better place, because they kind of realized that they cannot control the conversations. It is what it is. But now you see that people who've been kind of going around sharing stories on Yammer, now they have the courage and the toolkit to go also externally. So obviously, we had a lot of learnings on the way, and when we fell not very elegantly many times. I think a couple of learnings were, interesting enough, social again. We realized there was no clear ownership in every market, and take the times almost 30, and you can imagine what the mess is. So where do you start? How do you make HR and employer brand people feel accountable in a space where they're not at home? So we did quite an exercise there to draw a stakeholder heat map, and we ended up that we got LinkedIn just because marketing couldn't be bothered. They thought, LinkedIn is too much B2B, so you have it, right? So I ended up owning LinkedIn for the company, which is a big responsibility. The problem was Facebook, for example, stayed very local, and not only is it very fragmented, but we also have like tens of Facebook channels in every market, right? So that's my next nut to crack. How do we centralize Facebook? Do we want to have a consistent strategy on Facebook? And I think that's easier said than done. Another practical issues that we stumble on, again, a social media policy, right? Local complexities, like in Qatar, social media rules are much stricter than let's say in UK. And interesting enough, a lot of people actually wanted more guidelines, right? So I think the guideline that we put out there, we said, use your common sense, right? And trust your employees, your customers, your competitors, that they will say the right thing. And for us, we made that fake policy with only one word, on social media. Just use your common sense. Again, as I said, our CEOs and our external affairs were very, very nervous around floods of customer concerns. But people, again, have their common sense. They want a career, so they know that they will channel their customer complaints on a different platform. And I think, another big learning for us is like, we said, go bold if you want to go for it, and apologize later. There were so many gaps we found. We just went bold. We went with a big launch. We gave the employees kind of the power to take the brand and bring it to life. And I think a couple of years down the road now we've got the credibility. People kind of see that we weren't completely crazy and starting seeing the benefits. And I think the proudest moment I had in the last couple of years is when the Netherlands, one of our most successful operating companies, where we have a very, very strong presence, actually started using "We're best when you're at yours" in their commercial campaign. And that's when I felt, you know what, we are on to something. So that's been the story. That's been the journey of the brand until now. And I actually had a couple of examples of videos. So shall we try with 2 examples, Scott? I'm not sure if the technology will work. I know video is a bit tricky over webinar, but I can show you 2 translations of kind of the same story, but let's say with the local melody. So let's start, and I'll show you what Germany have done with the employer brand. And interesting, you know, a lot of you maybe who worked in Germany before or whose companies have affiliate company in Germany. Germans are very strict about the language. They also have laws around the use of German. And interestingly enough, they also were one of the markets that they decided not to translate "We're best when you're at yours." Right, so they went with the English version. So let me show you what they've done in terms of showing how you know, a grad leaks kind of the employer brand in Germany. And let me know if this works. So this is an example of you know, in Germany, I think they won a couple of awards. Philip here is one of our grads. But what's interesting is, okay, Philip was not scripted. You might not believe that, but he was using his own words. But it's his fellow graduates who actually filmed this. And this was something that we've done in almost all markets. So all the grad campaign that we launched 3 years ago, there was simply no agency involved in it. It was the groups themselves getting together. Obviously, some, you know, more talented than others in creating great films, and going on and saying, okay, can you use your words and explain what it is like to work at Vodafone, right? And again, if you look at our career websites, the Italian one looks different than the German one, and the Czech one. They all use kind of their own local touches, but again, the feel of the stories, the narratives is very, very, very similar in that kind of organic, free way. And I think, you know, we didn't talk a lot about purpose, right? So why I told Scott that, you know, let's give it a purpose. Spin. I think more and more as we learn more about the millennial workforce, and I know this is a buzzword and a lot of you are probably tired of reading so many articles about the millennials. However, what we've learned from millennials is that the biggest driver they have is that purpose, right? And if you're not able to translate that bigger, broader purpose of the company than just obviously making money and giving, you know, value back to shareholders, then you are missing a trick. So we've realized that we had to dial up our mobile for good, which was in many of our markets not very well known. I think we're very well known in emerging markets in Africa and India, where we're making a massive impact socially, or with M-Pesa, for example, but maybe less so in Western Europe. So we started putting more emphasis in bringing mobile for good to life. And I'll give you an example of a new work we've just completed that I feel very proud of. This is a new 360 interactive video, again filmed by our own employees, who actually, you know, got a camera, got the 360 cameras, as being very techy as they are, and filmed their work teaching students and teachers in a couple of refugee camps in Kukuma in Kenya, how to use our instant network for to basically to educate kids. So again, fantastic example, not curated at all. They speak, again, they use their words, the images are very authentic from the experience that they had there teaching kids how to use internet with our instant school platform, and they created this interactively, right? So it's a bit of a game. All of them, there's 3 of them actually telling their story about their experiences volunteering in Kakuma, and you know, quizzing the audience on, you know, what would you do if you were me, and, you know, kind of, you know, let's say an interactive video that we believe it's best, you know, it's the first in the industry. I haven't seen a 360 interactive video yet. Again, if you look at it, it's very simple and cute in a way that it's quite naively done and not professionally. But we believe now this is our latest, let's say, crown jewel, and we're going to start promoting it on social. But we felt that's fantastic, right? I mean, they took the initiative of creating this piece of content. And they also promised that this is not going to be the first one, right? They're going to have a series of their experience in Kakuma, because this is again saying, listen, we are 3 network engineers at Vodafone. We love our job, but, you know, we volunteer every year. We're on this program with the Vodafone Foundation, and in our own time, we go into Africa and teach kids how to use the internet. So, and I'm very happy, you know, there's a link here in. And you can actually in total world preview, you can watch it and play with it and see if you get the right answer. So again, why brand with purpose? Because it makes a lot of sense. Again, millennials taught us that it's a bigger driver than maybe comps or even career progression, and we feel we are maybe we're under indexed in this space. And in the next couple of months, hopefully, whenever you come across content Vodafone, you will feel that we're starting to push much more and make sure that we have a better recognition in the market, externally and internally, around all the great stuff we're doing for society, being in the digital world, being in emerging markets where our network, you know, access to our network makes a big difference in people's lives. So again, I don't want to bore you with more slides. I promised it will be on time, and then we will have 10 minutes or so of question and answers. So yes to you.
Fantastic, Catalina. That was excellent. So some questions. When you have you know, like for customer-facing companies, so B2C, such as Vodafone, where there's a strong consumer brand, how kind of what's your opinion on how separate the employer brand should be from that, or whether you should keep them closely aligned, or what's your thinking?
Yeah, that's a great question, and maybe my answer will be slightly contradicting what I've just talked to you about in the last half an hour, right? So we had a dilemma when we started 3 years ago, and we still have it, because we're seeing a huge overlap between these two segments, right? And the blurry lines between consumers and candidates, right? So we have over 500 million of customers around the world and about 1 million applicants. And just recently I was talking to my colleagues at Apple, and what they're doing brilliantly, for example, which I thought such a simple thing, why did we not think about it? They allow their customers to apply to Apple jobs with their Apple ID, right? And that's a very simple way of kind of telling everybody, listen, you customers, candidates, we care for you the same way, and we actually recognize you, right? I don't think we're there yet. We're not even that smart in terms of our data to recognize our customers through our candidates. We're going to do that. But we're having a discussion right now with brands, because even Power to You has been around for over 10 years, and we feel that's about time we maybe give it a bit of a refresh. And in these conversations I'm having with brands right now, that our relationship has matured and we're friends and we work together, we are actually thinking maybe more disruptive and merging the two scenarios. Again, ultimately, the proposition you have to customers is obviously that of the benefits of your services and products. The proposition you have to candidates is how it is like to work and thrive here, right? So there will still be areas where you need to separate the two. I think more and more, as these two segments kind of overlap, there is a need to have a very clear customer and candidate proposition almost in the same sentence. And if I look around, I think fast-moving consumer goods are doing a good job in that space. I think Heineken comes to mind, that they are kind of pioneering in this space. Again, Apple I mentioned. So there's a couple of companies out there that are kind of testing. I'm still to see, unless the audience maybe contradict me and they give me an example, I still to see a company that has the exact employer brand with their consumer brand. But I think the thought right now is going towards that. And first step is at least recognize among your candidates who are your customers, and treat candidates as you treat customers. Right, so that's at least the spirit of what we're doing in resourcing, what we're doing in terms of candidate experience. But again, I feel like that's kind of the direction of travel. But in all honesty, I think we're not there yet.
Great. So I got a question around the social media, and you're managing to take ownership of LinkedIn. So question, you say, I have an ongoing battle to get ownership of LinkedIn. I'm in HR and Twitter for careers, marketing/branding. Won't let us have it. We think it's more for us than them, but we're struggling to convince them. How do you make this conversation easier and allow them to eventually give us ownership of LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, etc.?
Yeah, so was the question about how about the ownership of the channels, right?
Yeah, how to make that, the conversation easier.
Yeah, I think the conversation will never be easy because you can't really control it, right? I think if you put a lot of authenticity behind it, and that's a right place to start. I think I have a couple of good examples. Like in Germany, for example, we rotate the ownership of the channels, so there's actually employees sitting behind the handle and handling both consumer conversations and candidate conversations. And I think that's, for me, best practice. In an ideal world, we would have that all the time in all the markets. It's not happening yet. It's interesting, right? I mean, obviously, social is still a scary thing because you never know, when you wake up in the morning, what kind of messages is there. But the worst thing you could do is to ignore the conversation, right? So we have a couple of rules in place on always answer, even if you have upset customers sending you messages on the wrong channel, let's say, direct them to the right channel and don't ignore it, because you make it worse. Make sure that it's always a two-way dialogue, and because otherwise it just becomes another channel where you broadcast, which is not what we want to do.
Great. And then, so another question is, so what's your view on local language versus business English? Should assets be translated or should they be subtitled?
Well, of course, I mean, depends on your audience, right? I mean, you should be talking to your audience in their own language. That makes a lot of sense, and that's something that we are very keen on, given our local roots. So I gave you the example of Germany. Obviously, everything is in German, but they just decided that we're best when your yours maybe sounds better in English. So in principle, we translate everything. We let them, with the exception of Power to You, which was a decision years ago, everything else is translatable. So that's kind of because again, you wanna mirror your audience, and you wanna speak in the language that they understand and they relate to. Because again, if from an Anglo-Saxon perspective, thinking of the whole world understand English, so get over it. I think it's a wrong, it's a wrong attitude. So again, we're very much into translation, into subtitles, and it's a pain many times, but it's I think it's worth it.
And then last couple. So for you, who should own bringing to life the EVP and continue beating the drum? Is it resourcing or is it comms/marketing?
Now I know it sounds like utopia, but in my ideal world, we'll all be redundant and employees will do it, right? So you would have someone that every now and again maybe create some relevant content that's a bit more professional and polished because you have big messages to send or big campaigns. But again, ideally, your employees would own it, would create it. With today's technology and access to information, everything, everybody can create amazing content. that's engaging. So I believe that that's the future. And if you look to a lot of the startups, they count on their, they don't have massive budgets or EVP, so they use their employees. I know it's always a discussion between us or brand. Again, in another utopia, EVP and brand, consumer brand would be the same team. And HR is there obviously taking, being the employee advocate and making sure that we attract the right people and we engage people, but it's really there in the background. So, again, I happen to work in HR, but I feel more of a marketer in HR, but I'm feeling an HR person because just of the nature of the dialogue we're having. So I think in the future you will see a change, and hopefully in a couple of years we'll see that nobody talks about employer brand, because employer brand is there whether you call it something or you don't call it. It will live through the dialogue and the narratives between what your employees, your candidates say about you.
And one final question is, okay, so where now? What do you see your challenges for for the next 12 months, and what does success look like against those?
What is success? What would be the measure of success?
Yeah,
for
the challenges that you see over the over the next 12 months.
I think we go into areas where talent is so scarce, like cybersecurity and big data. So I think success will look like, are we able to have a strong proposition and attract these new segments in a meaningful way, and in a way that they don't necessarily all go to Google, right? So again, our biggest challenge right now is to compete in that area, and it's hard because we're not there yet where we have a very distinct segment-driven proposition. So our employer brand is a bit one-size-fits-all. Obviously, we have a bit of a youth proposition with the grads, a bit of a more senior, but we haven't got to the point when we are laser sharp in terms of the segments we're targeting. So now that's the biggest challenge. Can we tailor the employer brand? Can we tailor the conversation and target those populations that naturally, would not consider us, right? And obviously that goes hand in hand with being much better at direct sourcing and more aggressive in terms of, hunting, than just thinking that, naively, that just because you have a beautiful campaign and you put it out there, everybody will be jumping around and applying, right? So those are, and again, for me, is also making sure that the business gets, outcome, right? That it would not just feel good about the brand and engage and attract candidates all the time, but they also feel like we're bringing value. And why not we're increasing the brand equity of Vodafone by having a stronger employer brand. And again, a lot of these things are not tangible, right? You cannot really put a number against it. But I think this is kind of directionally where we're going. And as a theme across, again, can we ensure that we don't just have, 10,000 or 20,000 brand ambassadors within our employee population, but all 130,000 of them actually speak well of Vodafone, because that's also a measure of how engaged they are, right? People who feel engaged, they feel proud, and then they are more likely to shout. Those who maybe are not that engaged are more on the fence and maybe keep it a lower key. And so again, lots of challenges and lots of exciting stuff ahead, and a lot of great things to do with, gives me hope that our employer brand function has become very strong across. If I talk to peers from the industry, we're starting turning EVP into a science more than an art, which is great. But I think we all kind of have the same challenges in this space, and there's still a lot to develop and to create. I think EVP as a function itself has only been there for a couple of years.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you so much, Catalina, for taking the time to share that journey with us. Fascinating insight and a great distance traveled so far. So we are out of time. So unfortunately, got more questions, lots of questions, but we will share the on-demand version with everybody who registered. And thank you, everybody, this afternoon for joining us. And thanks again to Catalina.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.